Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiranachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiranachari Yamuna Tiranachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari, Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Namo Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivacharya Star His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridasa Thakur Ki. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radhar Shri Vas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopagopinath Shyama Sundar Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Vrindavan Dham Ki Mathura Dham Navadvip Dham Ki Janath Puri Dham Ki Ganga Mai Ki Yamuna Mai Ki Tulsi Devi Ki Vrihad Mirdanga Ki Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Bhakti Distribution Ki Jai Prasad Distribution Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today's text is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 46, text number 30. Chapter 46, verse 30. And this is where Uddhava begins to talk, because Nanda Maharaj has been asking Uddhava so many questions, and now Uddhava has been listening very closely and paying attention to what is being said and actually understanding the minds of the residents of Vrindavan through the words of Nanda Maharaj, and is going to respond in the appropriate manner. Shri Uddhava Uvacha Yuvam Shlakya Tamanunam Dehinami Hamanada Narayane Kila Guru Yatkirta Martir Idrishi Yuvam Shlakya Tamanunam Dehinami Hamanada Narayane Kila Guru Yatkirta Martir Idrishi. Shri Uddhava Uvacha Yuvam shlakyatamanunam Dehinam ihamanata Narayane kilagurau Yatkrita idrishi. Devotees, Shri Uddhava Uvacha Yuvam shlakyatamanunam Dehina ihamanada Narayane kilagurau Yatkrita matir idrishi. Shri Uddhava Uvacha Yivam shlakyatamanunam Dehina mihamanadam Narayane kilagurau Yatkrita matir idrishi. Nobody else? Shri Uddhava Uvacha Yuvam shlakyatamanunam Dehina mihamanadam Narayane kilagurau Yatkrita matiridrishi. Anybody else? Shri Uddhava Uvacha. Shri Uddhava said, Yuvam, you too, Shlakyatamo, the most praiseworthy, Nunam, for certain, Dehinam, of embodied living beings, Iha, in this world, Manada, O respectful one, Narayane, for the Supreme Lord Narayan, Akila Gurau, the spiritual master of all. Yet, because Krita produced Matihi, a mentality, Idrishi, like this. Translation and purport. Sri Uddhava said, O respectful Nanda, certainly you and Mother Yashoda are the most praiseworthy persons in the entire world, since you have developed such a loving attitude toward Lord Narayan, the spiritual master of all living beings. Please repeat. Sri Uddhava said, O respectful Nanda, certainly you and Mother Yashoda are the most praiseworthy persons in the entire world, since you have developed such a loving attitude toward Lord Narayan, the spiritual master of all living beings. So there's a clue here that he's talking about Narayan. He's talking about, mentioning the name of Narayan in reference to Sri Krishna. We'll see why he's doing that. Purport. Understanding Nanda's mood as expressed by his statement, Manye Krishnam cha Ramam cha praptaviha surotamam, I think Krishna and Balaram must be two exalted demigods. Uddhava here referred to Krishna as Lord Narayan. Amagyanatimindasya kyananchana asakaya chakshurum miltanyana tasmai Shri Gurave namaha. Chaitanya Manostha Stapitanya Vitale Swaya Rupa Kadavahi Adadanta Santikam E Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Rishavanu Sudevi Pranamami Haripriya Vancha Kalpataruyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyavacha Pattanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namanamaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'm going to read the purports by the different acharyas and discuss them, and maybe something from the Gopal Champus there is time, and the Sri Brihad Bhagavatamrita if there is time. So I think it's 7.5 minutes left. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, in this world, Iha, among the devotees, Devaki and Vasudeva are more praiseworthy. But you too are most praiseworthy because the superiority of your prema. He's talking, of course, to Nanda Baba and Yashoda Mai. Nanda already said that listen to this carefully, Nanda already said that he knew that Krishna and Balaram were God. That was said in verse 23. He acknowledged that Krishna and Balaram were the supreme. Knowing that Nanda appreciated Krishna's lordly aspect, Uddhava describes Krishna in this verse as Narayan. That's the reason why. The guru of everyone, thereby emphasizing Krishna's power in order to sympathize with their sentiments. And we heard in a class that even though Nanda was aware at some level that his sons, Balaram, Krishna, Balaram, were in the category of Vishnu Tattva, at the same time, that did not in any way dampen his love for them or minimize or reduced the intense love that he had for the two boys. Jiva Goswami, Srila Jiva Goswami says, thus in two verses, Uddhava first encouraged them, Nanda and Yashoda, and the parents, by describing Krishna's greatness, taking advantage of similar statements from Nanda. In the universe filled with jivas, that's us, Dehinam, up to the great devotees, when Krishna makes his appearance, Narada and others are most worthy of praise. Devotees starting with Vasudeva and Devaki and proceeding up to the people of Raj are even more worthy of praise. This is kind of scale of values. Nanda and Yashoda are most worthy of praise. They are the best devotees. Shlagyatama. O most worthy of respect, Manada, I give respect to you too among all the devotees, since you have developed such attraction for Krishna. You are glorified by the whole world. So he's explaining here, Srila Jiva Goswami, that there are different categories. Very, very praiseworthy, and there are others that are more, and there are those who are the most. And he is considering Nanda and Yashoda to be in the highest category. Krishna is the shelter, Ayane, of all the Purusha avatars, including Mahavishnu, Nara. In other words, all the forms of Krishna. Purusha avatars, all the forms of Krishna. He is greater than the Lord of Vaikuntha. He is the shelter hard to attain, most excellent, most rare, and most auspicious. You're most praiseworthy since your minds are able to control this shelter of Mahavishnu, who is greater than the Lord of Vaikuntha by your Vatsalya Bhav. So here he's saying that you're most praiseworthy because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is being conquered by you. And you can conquer him by your Vatsalya Bhav, which is your love as parents, or your parental love. Sanatana Goswami says, Uddhava speaks for 14 verses. This is the first one of the 14 verses where he's going to be talking. Some explain as follows. Uddhava stopped up the prema of Nanda and Yashoda, tried to actually, by speaking of the powers of the Lord, This is a very important section of this verse. Uddhava tried to put a limit or to stifle the love of Nanda and Yashoda for the Supreme Lord by speaking of the powers of the Lord. In other words, Madhurya, which is sweetness, he wanted to have that superseded by Audarya, which is by our reverence. Defining the Lord in terms of neutrality to the world and seeing him as the soul of all things, which he is. The Supreme Lord is the source of everything. He is the soul of all things. And this had two goals. In other words, Uddhava had two goals in mind. And like I said at the beginning, he was responding to the emotional content expressed by Nanda Maharaj in previous verses. He was so overtaken by the love of Nanda and Yashoda, and at the same time was so afraid that their love would be so unstoppable that they might just die in front of him. So he's trying to bring it down a little bit by talking not about the sweetness, but about the majesty and the power. But again, as I said before, it didn't work. He had two goals. He could reduce their suffering by stopping their prema, since their suffering arose from their prema. This would fulfill one of Krishna's orders, order to pacify my parents, pacify the residents of Vrindavan, give them some hope and some solace. And that is the first goal. If Krishna came to Vraj attracted by their prema, Krishna could not fulfill the duties to the Yadus. In other words, he had to stay back in Mathura to fulfill the duties that he had to the Yadus, to the members of the royal order, and to the members of Mathura that were also great devotees. That was the second goal. In other words, he's already made it very clear that he has to stay back because there is danger that all the enemies, all the friends of Kansa and the enemies of the Supreme Lord, the legitimate royal order, are ready to attack, and he has to stay there and protect. But it was impossible to stop their deep prema. Great devotees like Uddhava knew this by their experience. Moreover, stopping prema in the devotees will not destroy their suffering, but rather increase their suffering, since prema, with its transformations, is the form of the highest bliss. And we've talked about this, and so many devotees have talked about this before. It's not that this so-called suffering is the same thing as our suffering in the material world. It is an impetus for increasing love. But the love, you say, that comes to a point where it's going to explode. The heart is going to explode. But let us remember that when we come to the point of experiencing divine love at this level, at very high level, it's never enough, and it's always growing. We can never be satiated. It's never enough. It doesn't matter how exalted it is. It's never enough, and it's always growing. Never stops growing. The devotee's joy in prema shines in the Lord. The devotee's joy in prema shines in the Lord. In other words, you see in the Lord, by his effulgence, how he's receiving the love of the devotees. The people of Raja pray, Karmabir Brahmyamananam Yatra Kwapi Share Chaya Mangala Charitair Danai Ratirna Krishna Ishvare. And this is a verse from the next chapter, verse 67. Next chapter is chapter 47. And the translation is, wherever we are made to wander about this world by the Supreme Lord's will, in accordance with the reactions to our fruitive work, may our good works and charity always grant us love for Krishna. Whatever our situation is, whatever we have to go through, whatever our karmic reactions are, may our works and charity always grant us love for Krishna. Secondly, if the Lord comes to Vraj, sometimes to please his parents, and he's coming back. He said that before. It does not destroy his relationship with the Yarus, since he is still with them. In other words, the Lord can be anywhere, and he's anywhere and everywhere at any time and at all time. So he's present in Vraj, he's present in Mathura. So the fact that he comes visibly to Vraj doesn't mean that he's not with the Yarus in Mathura anymore. He's still there. Moreover, this explanation is not according to the manifested pastimes where Krishna did return. Because of their experience of affection in seeing Krishna as their son, they always saw Krishna as their son rather than the Lord. In other words, the vision of Nanda and Yashoda is that Krishna is their son. And whenever there is talk about the powers of the Supreme Lord, they're not very interested. They just want to talk and hear about their son. Yashoda saw him as her son rather than the universal form. Since that perception was the highest, the explanation in which Yashoda sees him as the Lord is false. Yashoda couldn't see him as the Lord. It was only Nanda. Because when the conversation between Nanda and Uddhava, when Uddhava arrived and they had a conversation, Nanda and Uddhava, Yashoda was silently listening, and she was not actually taking in much of what's being said because she was in her own world, but silently listening and just thinking, where is my son? Why is he not here? Why is he not here? This is the meaning. Astonished by the intense prema of the couple, Uddhava first praised them with 4 verses. In verse 34, he says that Krishna will return. We saw that before. In this way, he comforts the couple completely. Not only did he comfort them, but Krishna did return as stated by the people of Dwarka. Yar yambu jakshapa sasarabho bhavam gurum madum vatta sugridhi drikshaya tatrabda koti pratimakshano bhaved pravim vinakshnor ivanastavachuta. And this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 11, verse 9, where it says, O lotus-eyed Lord, when you go to Hastinapur or Vraj to see your friends, this is people from Dwarka speaking, one moment becomes like 1 trillion years for us. You who belong, for us who belong to you, and who become like eyes without the sun. I'll read again. So here are the people from Dwarka, saying to the Supreme Lord, again experiencing separation. Oh, lotus-eyed Lord, when you go to Hastinapur or Vraj to see your friends, one moment becomes like 1 trillion years for us who belong to you and who become like eyes without the sun. There were no other friends in Mathura area at that time except the people of Vraj. First, Uddhava praises the couple. In this world, among men, devatas and sages, you too certainly are most worth of praise. Devotees are to be praised. Prem bhaktas are praised more. The devotee with special affection is praised the most. In other words, devotees are to be praised because to become a devotee or to become an aspiring devotee is very rare. It's extremely rare. So devotees are to be praised. But those devotees who are filled with love for the Supreme Lord, are called Prem Bhaktas, are praised more. And the devotee with a special affection, specific affection, like as a parent in the mood of parenthood or in the mood of beloved, sweetheart, friend, etc., are praised the most. You too are most worthy of praise, all most worthy of respect. I give respect to you too, since you are dedicated to the Lord of all jivas, Narayane. Now he is bringing up the name of Narayan, the Guru of all, including Brahma. Now that you think of him, since you think of him as your son. Though Uddhava describes the Lord's greatness he's ultimately glorifying Nanda and Yashoda. So this is what's happening here, that after the conversation that, in the course of the conversation that Uddhava is having with Nanda Maharaj, all of these things are coming about. And I'm going to read from the Gopal Champu some points that came up in that conversation in regards to wanting to know about how Krishna feels about Nanda and Yashoda now that he is away from them in Mathura. Because Nanda and Yashoda were still grief-stricken, Uddhava spoke with intense agony. You two are most fortunate. Do not grieve. You will soon see that Krishna resides here at all times. What to speak of being close? He's everywhere. The word Krishna Vatma means fire, because fire pervades, like Krishna. Thinking that the two would be further aggrieved in thinking of Krishna being everywhere like an ordinary object, Uddhava tried to pacify them by speaking in another way. Uddhava is very perceptive. He can understand the minds of the people he deals with, and he knows how to give them solace, comfort, advice, counseling, whatever is needed for the people to be able to be peaceful and satisfied in progressively moving forward. So he says, no one is dear to him, and no one is his enemy. And he's talking in terms of Narayan. He is Narayan, so no one is dear to him, and no one is his enemy. He does not see anything as his possession or belonging to anyone else. Thus no one can be the father or mother of the Lord. Though this is so, he accepts these sentiments from his devotees in order to mitigate the pain arising from their prema. Thus, how can he give you up when you're suffering like this? It's an important point because he's accepting the sentiments of his devotees to the point that the devotees are blinded to the understanding that he is the Supreme Lord. And they see him as their beloved, their son, their friend, their master. That's Yoga Maya. Remember that there are two Mayas. Mahamaya, which is the one that is blinding us to what's really, really true in the material world. And Yoga Maya, which is blinding the pure devotees to the Supreme as to the understanding that he's the Supreme, and therefore we cannot have an intimate relationship. No. Yoga Maya is covering all of that so that everybody can have a very, very intimate relationship with the Supreme Lord. And that is a promise that is given to us, that as we become more and more absorbed in Krishna, that he will be reciprocating with us likewise. I was listening to a class last night in the middle of the night. During those hours I couldn't sleep. And it was Amarendra Prabhu. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's an amazing speaker. He's a young man. He's very knowledgeable, very funny, very entertaining, and very accessible. And somebody in the audience at the very end of the class, this is a huge class. The class was given in April this year in Silicon Valley. And at the end of the class said, well, how can we think of Krishna all the time? Because he was propounding that we need to have our mind in Krishna, to think of Krishna, to do everything for Krishna, to have Krishna ever present in our consciousness, which is the goal of devotional service, to always remember Krishna and never forget him. So he said, well, I want you to get a little notebook. He was saying to the whole audience, there were hundreds of people there. And every day, at the end of the day, you write 3 things that where you see Krishna in action in your life that day. This happened to me because Krishna was aware, or this happened because Krishna was making it possible. Specific things. So every day, 3 things to write on this little diary. And as we know, when we do something like this over and over and over again, that our mind immediately kind of focuses in that direction, trying to say, oh, what am I going to write this evening? What I'm going to say in my little notebook. And in this way, through practice and consistency, it invites the mind of the individual to be more and more and more and more and more absorbed in thoughts of the Supreme Lord. I thought it was a great recommendation, and it's something that maybe we can consider putting that in practice. How was Krishna's hand present in our life that day, at the end of the day? How was he present in our lives? How was he able to make, of course he's able to do anything, but how was he making this possible and that possible? And in this way we'll be thinking, what am I going to write this evening? Yeah, this. And maybe, instead of 3 things, one may come up with 5 or 10 or 15. Not that we need to do that, but it may come spontaneously at the end of the day. And after we do this for a number of days, we may have a long, long list. And that we may be automatically thinking, what am I going to write? And let me look at Krishna, because Krishna is ever present in our lives. Everything that is happening, everybody that's around us, any circumstance, any activity, any thought, everything Krishna is witnessing there, and Krishna is ever present in our lives. We don't see him, but maybe we can start feeling him. And one way to feel him is to be aware of what it is that how he's interacting with us and what is happening in our lives on a regular basis. And I recommend this to be consistent, because in that way, our remembrance of Krishna in a very simple way will be increased more and more. So going back to the text. Nanda asked, "My dear most fortunate one," asks Uddhava, "does the son of Sudha fare well now that he's free and has rejoined his children and other relatives? One should taste the great nectar coming from Shukadev's mouth. I will present this in detail." And so he starts talking. And Nanda was pleased because of the help rendered by Madhukanta, which is one of the bards that is describing all these things. Gave blessings to Madhukanta before the questions were described, addressing him as greatly fortunate. He asks, "That boy, the color of a rain cloud, who entered my heart, stayed there for a long time. Then he took birth. Does he remember his father now?" That's Nanda asking. "O Vrishni warrior, does Krishna, who was born in the 8th month and who is not standing before you, remember Yashoda, who feared danger for him? Does he have individual friendship in his heart for his mother, father, relatives, and others?" He asks many, many questions. His laugh, his speech, his playful glance, and his gestures, which were all sources of happiness previously, make us into immobile objects with limp bodies, since they now playfully pierce all our vital organs. I have great attraction to my son. Do not think that I have material attachment. These 2 boys are not ordinary. Garga has said that the devatas, or the demigods, worship them in meditation. Both you and we understand Krishna's great power. Krishna and Balaram killed Kamsa, strong as 10,000 elephants, killed the best of elephants, and killed the hordes of wrestlers as mere play in front of you. They broke Shiva's bow as if it were a flower stem. Then again they killed many demons and lifted the mountains. What else should I say? Having said this, he spoke again. Again, though Krishna shows prowess to indicate he is the Lord, I take him as a tender child and have pure affection for him. What can I do? He's helpless. You can see him as a tender child only. That's his father, Nanda Maharaj. With tears in his eyes and throat, Nanda was unable to speak any longer as his breathing became choked. When Nanda described Krishna's qualities to Uddhava, Yashoda became emotional. She perspired. Milk flowed from her breasts and tears flowed from her eyes. Uddhava, on seeing her, thought, she will become a river. She's melting. She will become a river. Understanding this, Uddhava began to think, and this addressed specifically the verse for today. To Uddhava, it is my great fortune to witness these two devotees inundated in such deep affection for Krishna. But this must be considered. It is most difficult for them to spend their time without him. It is impossible for my master to come here, and it is impossible for them to go there. Remember that Maharaj was talking about why they don't go to Mathura. It's not that far away. It's impossible for Krishna to come. It's impossible for us to go. Does anybody remember why is it so difficult for them to take a trek or a trip to Mathura? Do you remember? Maharaj talked about this yesterday. The question I'm asking is, why is it so difficult for Krishna to come? He's in Mathura now, to come to Braj. And why is it so difficult for his parents and the residents of Braj to go to Mathura and be with him? Because the moods are totally different. In other words, the mood of intense love that is in Braj is not present in Mathura. It would be like a big letdown. In other words, they want to experience this love, and because they are separated from him, the love is greater and greater. It keeps increasing and increasing and increasing. So if you take them to Mathura, if they go to Mathura, that's going to put a stop to that growth of their love. It's going to confuse them. It's not going to work. Though it is impossible to destroy or weaken their natural affection, if it can be interrupted somewhat, it is possible for the two of them to survive. I'm talking about Nanda and Yashoda, not otherwise. This restriction on their affection can happen if they gain knowledge that he is the Supreme Lord, or knowledge of his greatness caused by glorifying his prema. Now is a good opportunity to inform them, since Nanda has just mentioned that it is possible that Krishna is the Lord. We have a few minutes left, and I would like to make a few comments about some things that I thought when I was meditating on how to prepare the class. Remember that Vyasadeva was not satisfied when he wrote the Srimad Bhagavatam, because the most important element in the Bhagavatam is the presence of the Supreme Lord, and he was not glorifying the Supreme Lord. He was not talking about his activities. So Narada gave him the advice, you forgot to bring the source of all things into the narrative. And so Vyasadeva writes with the 10th canto, which is 90 chapters. And remember also that Shukadeva Goswami couldn't even, in his narrations to Pariksha Maharaj, couldn't mention the name of Radha. Do you remember why he couldn't mention the name of Radha? When he was talking about the gopis? Because he would just break down. He wouldn't be able to continue narrating the story. Because his affection for Radha is so intense that he would just completely be destroyed emotionally, and he wouldn't be able to continue. And I was thinking about Srila Prabhupada. A thought came to my mind. Srila Prabhupada translated and commented or wrote purports to the first 9 cantos, and then the 10th canto up to chapter 13. But then it was his servants that continued the translation and purports, commentaries, basing them on the purports and commentaries by the acharyas, which we read in the morning. What does that sound like? That Prabhupada was not going into chapter 14 and onwards. That Krishna did not allow that to happen. Like Shukadev Goswami, possibly, he would not have been able to stand the depth and the intensity of the love of all these verses that we have been listening to. Thank you so much, Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Kanvanta Maravindanalaya Taksham Marhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Akom Vikamaniya Vishesha Shobha Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasa Sakalen Priti manti Vasyanti panti kayanti Jiram naganti Ananda chinmaya sadhu Jala vigrahasya Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami 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 Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami
Gokula Yasomati Nandana Rajabaranagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Yasomati Nandana Rajabaranagara Ranjana Kana Gopi Parana Dana Madana Manohara Gopi Parana Dana Madana Manohara Gopi Parana Dana Madana Manohara Gopi Parana Madana Manaha Kaliyadama Navidara Kali Kaliyadamana Vidana Kaliyadamana Vidana Kaliyadamana Amala Harinama Miya Vilasa Amala Harinama Miya Vilasa Amala Harinama Miya Vilasa Miya Vilasa Vipinan Purandara Navina Nagara Bora Vamsivadana Suvasa Vipinam Purandara Navina Nagara Bora Vamsivadana Suvasa Vipinam Purandara Navina Nagara Bora Vamsivadana Suvasa Vipinam Purandara Navina Rajajana Palana Surakula Nasana Rajana Palana Surakula Nasana Rajajana Palana Surakula Nasana Rajana Palana Surakula Nasana Nanda Godana Rakulaya Nanda Godana Laya Nanda Godana Rakulaya Nanda Godana Rakulaya Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Govinda Navanita Taskara Sundarananda Gopala Sundarananda Gopala Sundarananda Gopala Sundarananda Yamuna Tatachara Gopi Vasana Hara Rasarasika Kripa Moya Yamuna Tatachara Viprasana Hara Yamuna Tatachara Gopi Vasana Hara Rasarasika Kripa Moya Yamuna Gopi Vasana Hara Rasarasika Kripa Moya Shri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Natabara Shri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Natabara Shri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Natabara Vallabha Vrindavana Natabara Bhakati Vinoda Shraya Bhakati Vinoda Shraya Bhakati Vinoda Shraya Bhakati Vinoda Yasomati Nandana Braja Baranagara Gokula Janakana Yasomati Nandana Baranagara Gokula Janakana Amala Harinama Miya Vilasa Amala Harinama Miya Vilasa Amala Harinama Miya Vilasa Amala Harinama Miya Vilasa Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Shri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Natabara Shri Radha Vallabha Natabara Bhakti Vinodashraya, Bhakti Vinodashraya, Bhakti Vinodashraya, Vinodashraya. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Haribo, Haribo, Haribo Nittai Gaur, Haribo Nittai Gaur, Haribo, Haribo, Haribo Nittai, Nittai Gaur, Haribo, Haribo, Haribo Nittai Gaur, Haribo, Haribo, Haribo Nittai Gaur. Jaya Radha Golokananda, Radha Golokananda, Radhe. Jaya Radha Golokananda, Radha Golokananda, Radhe. Jaya Radha Golokananda, Radha Golokananda, Radhe. Jaya Radha Golokananda, Jaya Giri Govardhan, Giri Govardhan, Giri Govardhan, Jaya Giri Govardhan, Jaya Giri Govardhan, Giri Govardhan, Jaya Giri Govardhan, Jaya Giri, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jai Shri Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Golokananda ki jai. Lord Krishna is beloved son of Yashoda, transcendental lover in the land of Braj, the delight of Gokula, known by the nickname Kanna, the wealth of the lives of the gopis, the attractor of Cupid, and punisher of the serpent Kaliya. These pure holy names of Lord Hari are full of sweet nectarian pastimes. Lord of the 12 forests of Braj, ever youthful, the best of lovers, player of the flute, and excellent dresser, protector of the inhabitants of Braj, destroyer of demonic dynasties, keeper and tender of Nanda's cows, giver of pleasure to cows, land, spiritual senses, husband of the goddess of fortune, butter thief, and beautiful little cowherd boy of Nanda Maharaj, wanderer of the Yamuna riverbanks, thief of the garments of the gopis, enjoyer of the mellows of the rasa dance, very merciful, lover and beloved of Sri Radha, the great dancer of Vrindavan, and the only shelter of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. And before chanting the Shikshastika, I just want to remind everyone that on Friday evening, it's called Last Friday because it's the last Friday of this month. We'll be having Harinam at the corner of Churton and Margaret Streets right in downtown Hillsborough from 6 to 8, and lots of people there. It's like a little fair. So please come between 6 and 8 on Friday evening on Churton Street at the corner of Margaret. Chaito Darpana Marjanam Papanam Shreya Kairavya Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Pratipanam Pranamrita Swadanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrapitani Amrita Smarane Nakala Etadrishita Vakripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durdaiva Midvishami Hadjaninanuraga Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Suhishuna Amani Namana Dana Kirtaniya Sadahari Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Va Jagadisha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmani Ishvare Bhavatad Bhaktir Ohaitaki Twai Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitamam Vishame Bhavam Budao Kripayatavapada Pankaja Stita Duli Sadrishim Vichintaya Nayanam Gadashudaraya Varanam Gadgada Ridaya Gira Pulakarnishitam Vapukada Tavanamagrahane Bhavishyati Yugayatam Namishena Chakshusha Pravashayatam Shunayatam Jagat Sarvam Govindam Virahename Ashlishyava Padamritam Padastumam Adarshanam Marma Hata Karotuva Yata Tatava Vidadatu Lampato Mat Prananatastu Se Para. Victory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, congregational chanting of your holy name alone can render all benedictions living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. They're not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please meet me. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand at end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace or makes me brokenhearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shisha